Good evening. Today is Wednesday, June 2nd, and it is 7:01 p.m. And this is the District of Seashell regular council meeting. We have an amended agenda. Just want to confirm that all councillors have the amended agenda. Thank you. So I'd look for a motion. First of all, any conflict of interest for tonight? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you. I look for a motion to adopt the amended agenda. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. So the month of June is National Indigenous Peoples Month. So in acknowledgement of the recent discovery in Kamloops, we're going to start our meeting this evening with a pause to honor those who lost their lives in the residential school system. And we recognize the collective grief and trauma that colonization continues to cause to this day. Meaningful reconciliation involves much more than symbolic gestures like lowering flags, and we're fully committed to doing this work. So we're grateful to our Seashell neighbors who work with us on this journey. And I'd like to thank the Mayor and Council from the town of Gibsons for the presentation that we'll be viewing. So this viewing will be 2 minutes and 16 seconds. And Jennifer? Thank you. So we're going to move on to our delegations. And before we turn the floor over to our first presenter, I want to advise those watching that they may find the upcoming presentation disturbing. The topic of this presentation this evening is human trafficking. The upcoming presentation and the terms used during the presentation may include sensitive and/or distressing content. So some of you watching may not have been aware of it and may be hearing this information for the first time. We felt this was a very important issue to bring forward, as we all need to be aware of how easy residents, some as young as 8 or 9, even in small communities like ours, can be taken and become involved in trafficking. And the delegation will provide us all with education and tools so that we can do our part in combating illegal human trafficking. With that, I'd like to welcome Kathy Peters.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So human sex trafficking and sexual exploitation for the purpose of prostitution is the fastest growing crime in the world, and it's very much here in BC. So what is human trafficking? It's recruiting, transporting, transferring, receiving, holding, concealing, harboring, or exercising control over a person for the purpose of exploiting them. The key word is exploitation. This is modern day slavery. Here are some stats. 13 years old is the average age of recruitment into the sex industry, much younger for Indigenous girls. In the Lower Mainland, the target age now has dropped to 10, 11, and 12-year-old girls. COVID has made this much worse. Traffickers are very organized and sophisticated. 54% in the sex industry are Indigenous. They are, and it's much higher in urban centers. They are severely overrepresented in the sex industry. This is the worst case of systemic racism in the country and in our history. I shared this with the BC Indigenous Chiefs and Federal Minister of Justice, David Lametti, a couple of months ago. At the very least, Indigenous women and girls want forensic nurses and rape kits. 82% involved in prostitution had childhood sexual abuse or incest, which is preparation for prostitution later on. 72% live with complex PTSD. This is the worst form of trauma a human being can experience. 95% in prostitution want to leave. It is not a choice. It is not a job. It is not work. 86% have housing needs. 82% need drug rehabilitation. And this is the new stat I just got. 84% of prostituted persons are pimped or trafficked. So the idea that, the majority choose of their own volition is just not the case. I've been raising awareness about sexual exploitation, and specifically child sexual exploitation and trafficking, to every city council, MLA, MP, and police agency in BC since the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act became federal law in 2014. I've been raising awareness about this law so the police would enforce it, so the public would understand it and be able to report it. The law has 3 parts. Number 1, it targets the demand by targeting the buyer of sex. The predator, exploiter, trafficker, pimp, facilitator, John, and buyer of sex are criminalized. Number 2, recognizes a seller of sex as a victim, usually female, and is immune from prosecution. Number 3, exit strategies are put in place to assist the victim out of the sex trade. This law focuses on the source of the harm, the buyers of sex and the profiteers. The clear statement from Parliament was that girls and women in Canada are not for sale. This is the RCMP poster, that they are full human beings with dignity and human rights. Vancouver and Toronto are global sex tourism hotspots, and this is what nobody knows. Canada is known as a child sex tourism destination, and I got that from the TIP report in 2020 from the US State Department. And the other book that goes over this very clearly is called Sex Industry Slavery, Protecting Canada's Youth by Dr. Robert Christmas. He is a police officer from Winnipeg. Council has received my package, my handouts. Those handouts are a start to address human sex trafficking, especially the handout that I had on stopping child sex trafficking. That is very useful. Also, my website, beamazingcampaign.org, is just great. There's a lot of good information here. The global sex trade is growing very fast. It is targeting our children because children is where the money is, fueled by the internet where most of the luring is taking place. Contributing factors to a rapidly growing sex industry is globalization, unregulated technology, no surprise, limited law enforcement, and very little prevention education. And that's the bit that I do. Canada has a new national human trafficking hotline number. I did send you a wallet card, but there is the number. Provincially, we have OCTIP, which is the Office to Combat Trafficking, and Victim Link with a helpline. Now, I just don't hear much about OCTIP and Victim Link anymore, but they've got great resources. Pornography is fueling the sex industry and creating the market for commercially paid sex. Men and boys are the buyers and exploiters of sex, and they are the key to end exploitation. And I think the Moosehide campaign is really taking this up. The Vancouver Police Department gave me this great line. Our boys and men must understand there's a sacred part of the woman they have no right to. So what can you do in Seashell? I recommend a very simple strategy. You want to reduce the demand by targeting complicit businesses and diminish the supply by education and public awareness. Train your business licensing managers what to look for when granting business licenses. This is a very effective way to give the message to the sex industry it is not welcome in your community. Now, Port Coquitlam really jumped on this because they had Robert Picton, so they understand this. For example, certainly number one is unregistered massage and body rub parlors. Number two is nail spas. Then holistic health centers, day spas, modeling agencies, tattoo parlors, escort services, cheap bars and hotels, men's clubs, Airbnb, VRBO, casinos, dance clubs, group homes and foster homes, strip clubs, organized crime clubhouses, truck stops, homeless camps and tent cities, pool halls, rec centers, and work camps can all be typical covers for sex trafficking and exploitation. If there are crime clubhouses, you can use land use bylaws to remove them. Regarding hotels and motels, Ontario is best practices actually globally to curb trafficking. They mandate the registration of every guest who is physically in the room. The sex industry is targeting our youth, children, and the vulnerable in every BC community, and schools are the recruiting grounds for gangs and sex trafficking. A critical deterrent are the school liaison officer programs in schools. The officers prevent crime and protect the vulnerable. An anti-police narrative harms our communities. They are the only people trained to enforce the law. BC is getting further and further behind every province in Canada in both enforcing the federal law, which we don't do at all, and raising awareness with prevention education. Public awareness in BC is completely lacking. That is why I have sent information packages to all 190 city councils and regional districts in BC to warn of this rapidly growing crime. Just so you all know, I've almost hit 100 communities that I have now presented to in the last 3 months. I've been really working on this full time, and I've been working on this for 40 years. So I have 3 asks. Number 1, could I present to any stakeholder in your community? Number 2, could you alert the Premier and Solicitor General that this crime is a priority in BC and ask for the funding for provincial law enforcement and a provincial awareness campaign? BC, and I should say desperately, needs an interagency human sex trafficking task force, similar to what is available for drugs and gangs. And number 3, could you write me a letter of support? And I do want to talk about gangs for a minute. In Vancouver, we've got a gang war right now. It is out of control. And these gangs, you don't want your young people going to Vancouver unless they're going for a specific purpose. These gangs are ultra dangerous. Ultra dangerous. I cannot emphasize that enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, any questions of Kathy? Questions or comments? Councillor Rowe?
I don't really have a question, but thank you for your presentation. I'm a bit speechless, which if you knew me, that would be a wonder. So I just very much appreciate your passion around this and obviously your commitment to this. And I may come up with some questions that I will contact you with, but that was a lot of stunning statistics and information. I thank you for it.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think I mentioned, I saw the presentation at the regional district the other day. That was last week, I believe. And I have a sister who does a program in Edmonton to junior and senior high students around drinking and drugs, etc., and the impact, and has also started talking about, exploitation, because she wants to raise awareness with the students so that they know when they get approached, they know what's kind of behind that. It can protect themselves. And I think we also mentioned at the regional district to connect with the schools and the school districts and the parent advisory committees here on the Sunshine Coast. Because if the parents are aware of this, then they will ensure, or try to ensure that their students, their children, have the information for protection. So thank you for being here. Councillor Scott.
You mentioned the registration for hotels and motels. Is that something that can be done through municipal bylaw, or is that a provincial thing?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I know Ontario has just passed it provincially. They've got a bill, and I could even send that to you. So they've done it provincially. But I do know that municipalities are doing all kinds of things. So, for example, I presented recently in Burnaby, and they don't allow any unregistered massage parlors. They just don't, because they watch what's happening in Vancouver. It's out of control in Vancouver, and those are all brothels, just so you all know. Richmond, I presented there as well, and they've put a lid on the number of massage parlors, so there's no new ones allowed. So the numbers are dwindling there. Port Coquitlam, no massage parlors unless, they're registered massage therapists, and no Airbnb in Port Coquitlam. So you can certainly do it in your own municipality. Absolutely.
My question was more on the hotel motel guest registry, though. Is there any communities that are municipally enforcing that?
That's a good question. I don't know that, but again, Ontario has done it provincially. And I do want to say to all of you, the only reason I'm doing this is because the provincial government is not doing anything. So I am spent full time doing this, just trying to get the information out to communities. The provincial government, we had a BC Human Trafficking Action Plan that expired in 2016. Now, I just presented to the Solicitor General just 2 weeks ago, and I pointed all this out. His response to me was, okay, yes, we have a problem, but it's a federal issue. Well, it's not a federal issue. It's all three levels of government. And I mean, I've done this long enough to know the provincial government can do a lot. In Alberta, they're 20 years ahead of us. Ontario is 30 years ahead of us. They're best practices globally. So there's a lot that the provincial government can do. And when that border opens, Americans come up here for tourism, or anybody comes here for tourism, it is Vancouver, it's Tofino, it's Whistler, the Sunshine Coast. I mean, beautiful, beautiful place to visit. So that's why I'm just doing this as quickly as I can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, I'd like to see the report and the asks referred to staff to see what we can do around that, and they can come back to us with further information. So I'll make that motion. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate you coming here. Thank you for getting the message out. Our next delegation is Kylie Hutchinson with Transportation Choices on the Sunshine Coast. And this is with regards to tips for attracting cycle tourists to the Sunshine Coast. I attended the track session recently. I think it was their AGM, and Kylie presented there. It was fabulous information. So welcome, Kylie. Look forward to what you're going to tell us.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a correction, this is a presentation that I made 3 weeks ago for Sunshine Coast Tourism.
Right, sorry, Sunshine Coast Tourism. That's right, sorry.
Destination BC.
Yes.
So yes, my name is Kylie Hutchinson. I'm a board member with Transportation Choices Sunshine Coast. And I'm also a cycle tourist. Over the past 30 years, I've cycled all over the world. So what I'm going to talk about in the next 10 minutes is I'm going to touch briefly on the business case for cycle tourism and then some specific tips for attracting them to the coast. So cycling on the coast has already become known as a destination, a cycling destination, as this article from 2016 Explore magazine demonstrates. People want to come here on their bikes. And diving into the research, the first one from Tourism British Columbia in 2007 noted that this is an important tourism market and that cyclists tend to be more educated and affluent than your typical tourist. This same report found that over the 2-year period, 2004-2006, over 250,000 mountain bike tourists alone came from out of province, and again, an affluent group. Up 2015, Destination BC did a study where they noted the economic benefits that mountain bike tourism brings to communities. And in 2017, the Ontario Ministry of Tourism did a study that found that cycle tourists spend more and stay longer than typical tourists. And then finally, City of Victoria, also did a study finding that the average cycle tourist group spent $990 on a visit. So the next section of my talk, then I'm going to quickly go through these 29 tips to attract cyclists, and you have this as a handout in your package. And these tips are primarily directed towards hospitality establishments on the coast, or hotels, motels, Airbnbs, and restaurants and cafes. So starting off, when a cyclist is deciding where to go, one of the first things they're thinking about is what are the conditions of the roads. And so the shoulders are very important. So we're quite pleased with our new sections of shoulder that we have on Highway 101, but there is a way to go in terms of getting all ages and abilities. This is the infrastructure that really does attract cyclists. And TRAC has been working on identifying some of the problem areas on Highway 101 and putting some attention to them. And most recently, we've been providing input to MOTI on some of the gaps in cycling infrastructure. So you might have noticed over the past year that the coast has become a choice destination for day trippers coming. So these packs that will come and in their Lycra, and they'll just go for the day, but they're always they're looking to wrap up their trip in a cafe somewhere. So an establishment that can handle these groups is going to get the custom. And then when bikes come into town, when we're looking for a place to stop, we're primarily looking for somewhere where we can keep our bike in sight. We've got all of our gear on it. We've got an expensive bicycle. And so that's what we're primarily looking for in terms of a cafe or a restaurant. And when our bike is fully loaded, we tend to lean it against a wall nearby, again, because we want to keep an eye on it. This type of a bike rack we may use if it's not crowded and we can have space, but a bike rack like this will avoid like the plague, because if we've got a loaded bike, we're worried that our front tire is going to buckle. We also love establishments that will let us refill our water bottles. And also ones that if we're coming to a hotel or a B&B or whatever, if they give us specific directions. So what is the more scenic route to take, lower Marine Drive versus the bypass, or ways to avoid School Road. And if it's a hotel or a motel, we always appreciate rooms on the ground floor so we don't have to schlep our gear up stairs. And also, this is really important, allowing when you have establishments that allow bikes in the rooms. So that's of utmost importance in our decision of where we are going to stay. We have expensive bikes. We don't want to just leave them locked up on a post outside. If that's not possible, then some kind of secure parking is what we are looking for. It's a make or break for accommodation. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It can just be a shed, or even we're so grateful for something secure. We don't mind if you just make space in your messy garage for us. And then as an alternative, at least some covered parking. So as a proprietor, it's great if you have information on local repairs and supplies for us where we can go. And also just putting this information on a website, ideas of what we can do with our bike. So some popular routes to cycle or trails to look for. Here's another example of up the creek in Roberts Creek, where they're listing some of the ideas that that are specifically tailored to cycle tourists. It's also great too if proprietors and restaurants and cafe people know what are the off-highway options. So as cyclists, we're always looking to get off the highway as much as possible. And people might not know about taking red roofs or something, so giving them that advice. So TRAC has put together an app, a Sunshine Coast Bike Route app, and what this does is it describes kind of choice routes to take, or the grade of hills, and also other important things like grocery stores and stops of interest, and of course breweries and cideries. So an establishment, they might offer free maps or for sale. This is again catering to cyclists, or perhaps putting local maps on the walls of your establishment. And a really nice touch is having delivery menus in the rooms. Now, this might seem really kind of silly, but imagine that we've been cycling all day to get to our accommodation. We're exhausted. And after we've had a shower, the last thing we want to do is hop on our bike and cycle another, up the Selma Park Hill or whatever to go for dinner in Seashell. So ordering in is really nice for us. But what we will be looking for the next morning is your advice on where's the biggest, fattest, greasiest breakfast that we can find. Where's the diner in town that we want. So e-bike tourists aren't super prevalent these days, but if you are able to advertise that you offer a plug for charging an e-bike, you don't need a special plug, just a normal one will do. And I know there's a movement to put in local e-bike chargers up and down the coast. I just want to say about this that there aren't hordes of e-bike tourists coming to town. And so these chargers, they're not required as we do for electric cars. If we had one per community, then that's enough for cyclists to use them, at least for the moment, to put them somewhere near the grocery store or in Lower Gibsons where they can spend time. But residential e-bike users are probably going to be fine and not require these chargers. So I know that we have water restrictions on the coast, so mountain bike tourists may want to rinse off their bikes, so you're going to have a conversation with them about that. But we do love it when we have access to laundry because we have to travel very minimally and we have a lot of dirty clothes and a few dirty clothes, so that's always appreciated. Having a common area so that mountain bikers can get together and tell stories at the end of their day makes an establishment very desirable. And it doesn't have to be fancy. It could just be a fire pit in the backyard or a couple of picnic tables, just where they can congregate. And I just added this picture as well, because of course we always have our solitary cycle tourist who's going across the country and may choose to spend a night in a hotel if he knows that there's other cyclists there. And then of course groups, the more that we're able to accommodate groups with our accommodations, then we're going to be more attractive as a destination. So the next little items are just what I would consider little extras. So things like having basic bike tools available for guests or a bike pump. A lot of cycle tourists don't want to travel with the lock. They're heavy. So if they want to just spend the day, they're staying for a couple of nights and they just want to spend the day riding around. If you've got a complimentary lock, that's going to be very appreciated. Or things like in your establishment selling snacks or bike tubes. And you might even consider a bike shuttle service. If you live out in Twanak and that's a long way for people to cycle, then maybe you can pick them up at the ferry. Getting a little bit more advanced, having a drying room for wet gear. There are going to be those wet cyclists or these muddy mountain bikers that are coming in, and so they'll really appreciate a place where they can hang their stuff. And I just included this page because Italy has a whole network of hotels that are catered to cycle tourism, and people like me just drool when we look over these websites. And so Italy is known as a destination for cycle tourism, and these are a part of why. And so one of the things that TRAC is advocating for is a ferry to ferry coastal bike route, and with the idea that if we build it, they will come. People are actively looking all across Canada for places for their next cycling destination. And yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to stop your sharing. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Stigers, and thank you to Kylie for that presentation. I'm really impressed with the quality of the graphic that was produced. I think that will really go a long way to help operators. I took a look at this from a municipality perspective because we are a municipality. One that I think is probably most relevant to municipality is off-highway options. And I look at what we're doing in Seashell and some of the funding that we have secured. We have a really nice loop around West Seashell, but guess what the missing piece is? The highway. So I think just looking as we start to revisit our transportation master plan over the next couple of years, I think placing a focus on the highway from West Seashell into downtown will be important, as well as an off-road route through Davis Bay. So a continuation of Laurel Avenue is another really good option. And then also just some simple improvements in the West Seashell neighborhood, just to connect West Seashell to Davis Bay. There's some really nice infrastructure there that just needs a little fill in here and there, and it can be really high quality off-road route right beside the highway. I also want to flag the refill water bottles from the tap. I think that's something really good that the district can participate in. And the one that I don't think I see here is public washrooms. I think that's something the district of Seashell provides good value. So thinking about how we can create more public washrooms that are available and that do have facilities to fill up a tap or fill up a water bottle. Those are great value to cyclists and the local community.
Thank you. Another one that I think we as a municipality can look at is what kind of bike stands do we put out? Right? Do we have enough? Are there, are they something that the cyclist would use? I mean, when you talk about expensive bikes, my daughter rides and she's in Calgary. And I think her latest bike when it was outfitted was $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not something you want to go walking away,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it is expensive. Any other questions or comments for Kylie? All right, Kylie, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you getting this information out. I hope it gets out far and wide in our community and that they take advantage of it and we become a cyclist destination.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you, Kylie. Okay, bye-bye. So we have one more delegation. This is for an update for us by Brian Johnston, Rebecca Clady, Erin Joe. I see Nancy Denham here. I don't see Calvin Cragen with us, but Brian is going to do a presentation for us on an update on the journeying together in partnership. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks to Council for allowing us to come and be a delegation at your meeting. I am here talking about this initiative that we're calling Journeying Together. It was put together by a informal kind of steering committee that's composed of those people that Mayor Seegers mentioned. Hereditary Chief Calvin Cragen, local Seashell businessman Erin Joe, Nancy Denham, very active in the CIA reconciliation movement, and of course our own Mayor Darnell Seegers, who's active in everything. This group came together over the winter around some common ideas, convinced that through projects we could really demonstrate to the whole process of reconciliation and look at it through a kind of COVID recovery lens. The notion being that we really wanted to move forward with reconciliation, and COVID has gotten in the way and has pulled our communities apart and isolated us even more. And it's time now to try and reverse that. The group started with a number of core values and principles that might be the unifying tissue for a number of projects, might pull them together into a kind of cohesive whole that would look at this notion of making a much better place for us all to live, and also a much better destination for others who might want to come. And so we started with this unifying vision, and we worked then through a bunch of processes towards 4 goals. We wanted to prepare a report, which I'm presenting tonight in draft form, which kind of pulls it together and shows a path forward. We want support in principle for that report, because we are just an informal steering committee at this point. And we're suggesting that support in principle will broaden the tent and will help us to kind of move forward in a more collective whole. And on the understanding that support in principle doesn't mean that everybody has to agree to every single project that might happen under this initiative. Thirdly, we're looking for some agencies to sponsor some of the projects. And I'll talk about some of the projects in just a moment, but we're really under the gun now. We need sponsoring agencies to step forward, and we have a few that seem quite interested, but I'll be asking if the district might be interested in sponsoring a project at the end of this presentation. And then we would help those sponsoring agencies by submitting grant applications on their behalf. We've got some of those already started. We just need sponsors that will say, yeah, we'd like to take this one and run with it. We've done a lot of work so far. We came before you early in the process and came before the Chief and Council of the Seashell Nation and many members of the CIA Reconciliation Movement. We got enthusiastic support for the whole idea. And since then, we've talked to literally dozens of stakeholder groups, and they've suggested other groups we talked to, and the list of projects has grown. And we have a whole bunch of project ideas now. We've engaged individuals through the media. We've tried to get input from all different sources. We've encouraged some family discussions at the Nation. And we've now got this report that we're trying to get support for. We've kind of got 7 projects in the draft report. We think we can finalize this report in the next couple of days with final presentations to groups that might have some suggested changes to the draft. But all of the projects seem to work together in a kind of synergistic whole to pull the community together, deliver reciprocal benefits to all, generate trust, build relationships, help us to come together and remember the past and talk about the future and what potential we can all work towards. So the projects, some of which are in phases, I'll give the first one here is something we're calling removing the boundary between the district and the nation that kind of runs through McDonald's and goes north to Porpoise Bay and south into Trail Bay. Is both a practical boundary, but also a symbolic and a very meaningful boundary, and has caused pain in the past. And so there's a lot of interest amongst people who remember being taught as children on both sides of the boundary. You can approach it, but you can never cross it. And we think part of working together is this notion of taking down that boundary. And that will mean taking down some fences. And for those we can't take down, we might change and make more visual, make more attractive, and develop some interpretive signage potentially. There's a lot of opportunity here to landscape, to build a walkway along, and to tell a story about what the boundary used to mean. There's also some potential for us all to work together and maybe even some ceremonies around taking that wall down. At the end of the Trail Bay Pier, there's kind of a big open empty slab right now. One of the ideas that people have suggested is that we build a gazebo, much like the one in Davis Bay at the end of that pier, or it could be different, but it would be another opportunity to be a gathering place for group celebration. Someone suggested drumming circles. Others have suggested other small gatherings, formal and informal, and even individual use, trying to increase its aesthetic appeal as well as its utility, its use, and also in a perfect location to bring the two communities together. We have a lot of interest in a number of these projects from local businesses who are interested in donating materials and equipment and supplies and labor. A third project, also one that could happen in phases, would be kind of tentatively titled the Rock to Rock Walk. It would take the beautiful waterfront walk along the south edge of the district of Seashell and extend it eastward through Seashell Nation lands, and eventually could go all the way to the foot of Selma Park Drive, but in the interim could be built in just phases. And this would be a way of keeping users off of Sinku Drive, which makes things safer and more comfortable and increases the experience, but it's a real opportunity for some storytelling about the importance of the waterfront and could have a potential long-term benefit of pulling people off the highway and onto the waterfront to fill a gap in the regional trail system that we just heard about. Another alternative that people have talked about is expanding the gathering place, the small space on the grass just outside your district office and library on the south side, and rejigging some of the parking and vehicle access and egress from that site, and making better use of that entire public realm, and perhaps through some redesign gaining some more space for an area that could be a celebration place to bring the two communities together. Some people have mentioned totems, others have mentioned other interpretive storytelling opportunities and public art opportunities, but this could be an informal or formal kind of space, and could have a variety of amenities, including playground or perhaps a covered shelter or other things. Most of these ideas we've got a picture of, but we're still in the phase of this could happen, not exactly what would happen, because there's still room to massage and alter and change some of these projects into something more meaningful in the next round of engagement that would happen if some of these projects proceed. Another one that the local arts council has been working on, and the Downtown Business Association has mentioned, would be adding additional public art installations. We have some in the community now. The thought is we could do better. We could improve some of the things that are there. We could add some ideas. There's an initiative right now afoot of trying to identify a number of locations and commission some Seashell artists to tell some stories that need to be told, to beautify the community and educate and help us all to celebrate together and feel more like we're part of a cohesive whole. Another project is we're just calling a public garden at this point, or a community garden. This could even happen on private land. If we could find a vacant piece of ground like the one behind Palmeros here, and this is just an example, but if there are privately held pieces of ground that won't be developed for several years, we could try and secure some tenure on them for a few years and develop some demonstrations of, or some gardens that would allow us to workshop and program and have school visits to, and maybe learn more about Indigenous plants and what they've meant in the past and how they've been used. This is something that can happen with relatively little cost, but could be a powerful way of bringing the communities together, especially in a location like one like this. And again, this is just an example, because this would be close to that boundary and could be tied into that taking down the boundary kind of project. Finally, someone has mentioned a carving shed, the notion of something fairly modest, or it could be much more sophisticated, but a place where we can train some skills and demonstrate some art and practice some cultural practices and show locals and tourists and educate back and forth about some of the meaning behind some of these themes. And again, make this a better place to live, but also a really attractive place to visit. So we've got a number of these projects that we kind of are in the could phase, and we're at the point now where we've got the ideas, but we have no jurisdiction or authority. We're simply an informal steering committee of 4 people with 3 kind of worker bees that are helping to advance the process. And so we have 2 significant asks. One is we're looking for support in principle for our report, which can be finalized in the next couple of days. And we're just looking for something symbolic there that says, yes, this is a vision worth pursuing, even if we don't agree with every specific project in it. And we're also looking for agencies such as the district to step forward and say, yes, this is one that we'd like to pursue. We think we're well positioned to pursue it. we think it would be a great idea to pursue it. And if you could help us submit a grant application by the end of June for a significant amount of money to make it happen, then we'd like to lend our name and our support to a particular project. But before we do those two things, we're just looking for final comment about this draft idea about how to move forward. And any of your comments or concerns that you might want to raise would be most welcome at this point. But we do want to bring this report very quickly to a kind of conclusion because we're under the gun in terms of timeline. If we can't get project sponsors to step forward to submit grant applications in time for this funding opportunity, then so be it. This still has value and we still want some of these projects to move forward. But it would be nice to take advantage of significant grant opportunities at this point. There's about $1.25 million worth of capital cost in a very preliminary cost basis to implement these things, but there's also a very significant interest on behalf of some local companies that have stepped forward and said there's a few of these that we really think we'd like to be a partner in, and we'd like to donate some significant resources to make this happen. So in order to take advantage of that, we need the remaining capital and we need project sponsors. These are just some suggested ideas about who might be in a good position to sponsor a project. But you might have different ideas, or you might say now is not the time for the district to be adding. We've got lots of capital projects on the go already. But if the district was in a position to say, yeah, we'd like to take one of these, we'd like to support you through at least the grant application phase to see if we might move that project forward and get some funding so that it can happen without the need for local taxpayer support. I think I'll stop there, Your Worship, and we can all respond to questions and concerns. Thank you.
Okay. Could you go back to the previous slide? Because that's where your questions are. So first, I think the first question to council was, are there any of these projects that would concern us as a district of Seashell? Is there a project that's listed that we would not want included in the final report? Is there anything in there that we think should be removed? I can't see. Councilor McLean.
Yeah, so the one I have concern with is the gathering place at Town Hall. I think there's a huge amount of value in gathering space, and it really fits well with the intent of this project to bring people together. So the issue I have is the location. So what I did is I pulled up our 2018 Parks Master Plan.
Mm-hmm.
And within that, it actually proposes Hackett Park as the central gathering place. And if you look at what we have invested in the last year and are going to invest in, it's essentially a gathering place in Hackett Park. So I think we have funding for the stage. We've set up the amphitheater. Looking at what else we can do at Hackett Park. And so just directly from the Parks Master Plan, this is priority number 6. So it's fairly close to the top. And it cites minor improvements such as the addition of outdoor electrical kiosks and reorganization of spaces could further expand event opportunities. So I think this is what it would look like for this project in particular. Let's take a look at that lower field. How can we reorganize it? How can we get better electricity access and transform that into our public gathering spot? And just to further drive the point down, within that project, there was we also hired a consultation organization who put out a proper survey with hundreds of responses. And Hackett Park received 33% support for a outdoor community gathering place. Downtown Waterfront received 31%. And the location proposed by this project received 18%. So I think we have the feedback from the community that they would like to see Hackett Park. We have the investment, so I would really like to see it in Hackett Park rather than at Municipal Hall.
Okay, thank you. Council, anybody else? Councillor Rowe.
Just clarity. So for this question that we're talking about right now, we're being asked for support in principle, correct?
At this point, I think we're looking at, are there any of these projects that you wouldn't support or have any concerns about?
Okay.
Because I have to say, we presented to the Seashell Nation on Monday and they were in favor. They haven't formally, done that. They're going to be doing that at their meeting on the 9th. So what we're looking at this point is the report is in draft form. If there are any projects in here that we have concerns about, then we could potentially indicate that and it could be reflected in the report.
Okay. I support all of the projects, but I do, I'm a little bit on the fence around the location of a gathering space.
Thank
as far
you.
as the location goes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors? I can't see. Councillor Scott, go ahead.
I agree with Councillor McLean. I think what we're doing to Hackett Park fits the bill perfectly for a gathering place with more room and just the venue makes excellent sense. So the rest of the projects I think are great, but I say the Hackett Park for the gathering space makes more sense to me.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McLean, for taking the time to go through that Parks Master Plan, because I agree. Hackett Park, I think, is the better place. We do have issues around the Block 7 property and how it's laid out. There's no denying that. If we were to look at an additional gathering space or a reconfigured gathering space in Block 7, I'd be really curious to know what the impacts of the Spirit Square that was already constructed would be, because there was funding that was received for that. So I don't know if there's implications, do we add on to it? Can we tear it out? Things like that. The only project on the list that I'm concerned about, I'm still fully in support of it, but I'd be curious to know how to mitigate the risks around a publicly accessible carving shed, and how you might manage security of any carvings that are being undertaken, and also preventing it from becoming an impromptu homeless camp. But other than that, I think they're all fantastic projects.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments around this first? Councillor Kuster.
I just want to say I support everything on here as well. The idea of, the gathering place, Hackett Park does make a lot of sense, just even for parking, room, space for more people. Then it just becomes a question of how we, include some of the art and storyboarding in our design. But I would support either one. And I just wanted to thank everyone who brought this project forward. And I think it's important to do this as we move towards reconciliation. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McLean. I like the master plan. I totally understand that. I also know that are looking to reconfigure their parking space, and also the library is to use more of the outdoor space. So those are two of the organizations in the area that are looking to address that space. Another issue that's going to be coming forward to us is the farmers market. And I think I mentioned that before, the farmers market, moving them off of Cowrie in the location they're in. So those were kind of impetus behind reconfiguring the space, but I understand where you're coming from. So I totally take that under advisement. So I have Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I think if we want to take a serious look at this, can we fit the farmers market within the lower Hackett Park field? What kind of requirements do they have? I know they didn't like the grass, but it'd be interesting to see what we could do there. And I was going to bring this up with the committee specifically, but since Councillor Kuster mentioned it, I think a really interesting thing we could do is, if you look at Hackett Park, you see the lock blocks that now form the amphitheater. I think we could do something really neat by creating a storyboard like Councillor Kuster make. I was going to call it a comic, but each block is a part of a story. And I think that could be super interesting and a huge asset to that area.
I think the blocks are temporary. I think they're going to actually be covered with dirt. I think, not sure, but I think they are. And the farmers market cannot be on grass. That's just like, that's a health thing. They can't be on grass. They have to be on some kind of firm surface because of health issues or something. So, all right, that's question number one. So question number two, can we endorse the report in principle when it's finished, understanding that support in principle doesn't mean support for each and every project? Are we ready for that yet? Or do we want to see the report? Councillor Toth?
Thank you. As we've learned recently, we probably should not be quick to support things in principle, but there are opportunities for us to give a proper support of this once it is finalized, and I'm fully in support of doing so.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I don't want to vote on it today, but I'm willing to provide a verbal, yes, you're heading in the right direction. I think I look at the idea behind tearing down the wall and improving the border between the district of Seashell and the Seashell Nation lands. That's incredibly valuable. If I go back to my Parks Master Plan, #1 priority is a trail from downtown Seashell to Davis Bay. And now, while the rock to rock proposal doesn't meet that, it's a step in the right direction. So that is the #1 priority that came out of this very consultative process. So anything we can do to help make that happen, I think, is a huge asset to the district of Seashell. And the other projects, just it all works so well in bringing together the communities, from the gathering place to the gazebo right on our border. It's an outstanding project, and I want to support it however I can once I've seen the report.
Okay, so the third question then is, would be interested in sponsoring a project at this time? It sounds like we'd like to see the report come, and then once the report comes, we can look at sponsoring a project. That would have to come fairly soon then, in order to allow the committee or the project management team to put together the grant application. Right? Yeah, Rebecca's nodding her head. She's working on that right now. The grant application is very extensive. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I just wanted to add in that the sea walk along the Trail Bay waterfront, I think there's a lot of synergies between that and the Suncoaster Trail, because I seem to recall there was some conversation around a portion of the Suncoaster Trail being along the waterfront through downtown Seashell and through the Seashell Nation lands. So I think that's one that would be really easy to move forward in a timely manner, given that both the District of Seashell and the SCRD are working slowly towards Suncoaster Trail components.
And I think you'll find in the report it actually mentions that. So the draft report is out already, but it is in that draft report. All right, Brian?
Most helpful comments, thank you. That'll influence the final report. Really glad to get that kind of input and your thoughts. We can prepare a final report literally in the next 2 or 3 days. If there was any way of expediting that second and third bullet after that, we as a team would certainly appreciate it. I know Rebecca's trying to find a way to move forward on some of the grant applications as we speak right now, because we've only got 3 weeks to get them in. So I'm not sure if that's possible, but we'll leave that with you. And thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Our next council meeting is June 16th. So given that you'll have the report completed by the end of the week, we have ample time to get it onto our council agenda for the 16th.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all for being here. Have a good night. Bye-bye. All right, we are going to move on to proclamations, and we have 3 of them this evening. The first one is BC Child and Youth in Care Week, May 31st to June 6, 2021. Whereas children and youth in care have the right to safety and support for optimal development and social well-being, and youth in and from care want to raise awareness about the barriers they face and fight the stigma that comes with being a foster kid. And whereas the District of Seashell wishes to celebrate the accomplishments of children and youth in government care, including youth in youth agreements and children and youth in out of care placements, and whereas the District of Seashell wishes to raise awareness and supports opportunities for children and youth in care to share their stories and experiences, to celebrate their successes, to contribute to society, and to meaningfully engage and connect with their preferred cultures, people, and communities. Now, therefore, I, Darnelda Seegers, on behalf of the District of Seashell, do hereby proclaim that May 31st through June 6th, 2021, shall be known as BC Child and Youth in Care Week in the District of Seashell. Then there's a proclamation for Sunshine Coast Pride Month, June 2021. Whereas the District of Seashell and Sunshine Coast as a whole has a large and diverse, multi-generational, multi-ethnic, LGBTQ2+ community who honor a culture that is distinct and vibrant with its own history and traditions. And whereas traditionally in June, Sunshine Coast Pride Month celebrates LGBTQ2+ people, arts, culture, and recreation, and provides an opportunity for the whole LGBTQ2+ community to identify and connect with each other. And whereas social, emotional, and cognitive isolation are key factors in the disproportionate risk for suicide, substance abuse, and addiction within the LGBTQ2+ youth population, Sunshine Coast Pride Month provides vital opportunities for LGBTQ2+ youth to identify and connect with their peers and LGBTQ2+ elders, which enables a sense of belonging, which contradicts the risk factors, and strong community saves lives. And whereas we as LGBTQ2+ community members or as allies all strive to create a healthy, supportive, welcoming, safe, and inclusive community free from prejudice and discrimination, which we can all call home. Now, therefore, I, Darnelda Seegers, on behalf of the District of Seashell Council, do hereby proclaim that the month of June 2021 shall be known as Sunshine Coast Pride Month in the District of Seashell. And the final proclamation, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, June 15th, 2021. Whereas seniors of the District of Seashell are valued members of society, convey a wealth of experience and wisdom in our community, and deserve to live with dignity and respect, it is our collective responsibility to ensure they live safely and fully in a community that cares about them. And whereas victims of elder abuse are parents, grandparents, neighbors, and friends, and elder abuse is not limited by race, gender, culture, and circumstance, and whether physical, emotional, or financial, elder abuse takes an unacceptable toll on individuals and families. And whereas seniors who experience abuse or neglect face a heightened risk of health-related complications, and financial abuse can rob our seniors of the security they have built over a lifetime, and tragically, many older adults suffer in silence, burdened by fear, shame, or impairments that prevent them from speaking out about abuse. And whereas preventing abuse of older adults will improve the quality of life for all seniors and allow them to live as independently as possible and serve as leaders, mentors, volunteers, and important and active members of this community, contributing to the vibrancy of the District of Seashell. Now, therefore, I, Darnelda Seegers, on behalf of the District of Seashell Council, do hereby proclaim that June 15th, 2021 shall be known as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day in the District of Seashell. Thank you for your patience as I read all of those very important items. Moving on, item 5.1. This is minutes of the 7 p.m. regular council meeting of May 19th, 2021 for adoption. I look for a motion to adopt. Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes? Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Looking on page 45, right in the middle, the variance to the noise bylaw, allowing Jake's Construction to work from May 31st to June 18th. I just wanted to confirm with engineering that Jake's is indeed started that work and that they're on schedule.
Your worship, Jake's is on schedule.
Thank you. Sounds good. Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing no further items, we'll move on to item 7.1, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of May 26th for receipt and endorsement. Look for motion to receive and endorse. Moved, seconded. Any errors or omissions in this one? All those in favor? Thank you. So we're moving on to bylaws. This is item 8.1A. This is rezoning application for 5681 Ebtide Street. It's the Ebtide Developments Limited, and this, I believe, is the Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Allen.
I'm happy to move receipt of the report while we wait.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Allen. Mr. Kowowitz, welcome.
I'll fill in. I believe Director Allen just had a technical issue with his gear, but I can start a short presentation to introduce the project, and Director Allen can follow up with comments as well.
Thank you.
Just 1 second.
Hello, I was here the whole time, but I bumped a cable and everything went crazy. That was so. Apologies. I am here.
Okay, thank you.
I was setting up screens and everything went black, but I could hear you. Apologies. I'm still.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I lost one of my monitors all of a sudden, so I'm a little bit askew at the moment.
I'm having the same issue here as well. I
Can't find my mouse. All kinds of just happened.
Technology, yes, we love it.
So thank you for your patience, and if you don't mind, I will just open it up briefly with some comments. After which I will pass it over to Sven to dive into the details of the design and the premise of moving forward with this building.
Thank you.
So at this point, we're pleased to present an application for a new building. This is a market rental building in our downtown core on Ebtide Street. So I think we've all seen recently in the last period of time here that the housing needs assessment, the subsequent implementation report, it really truly shines a light on the need for housing in Seashell, and in particular rental housing, and even beyond that, housing located in suitable areas. And so this is a downtown development, rental development. So there's a good fit here, and this particular application sort of does match many of our needs. And so at staff level, it caught our attention, and we really worked hard to get this in front of council the best we could. So in addition to the hard work from staff, I will note that we received a very thorough and full application that allows us to review not only OCP and zoning requirements, but also allows us to get into the development permit, the design of the building. And that's the stuff that we've seen that the APC and the community really do like to talk to. We've also received a level of detail from the applicant that allows us to get started on a review of some of the exterior building code compliance concerns and so forth. So we're on the right track. We're intrigued by the prospect of this development. We do, of course, observe that changes to the zoning and the OCP are required to fit it within our regulatory tools. So we move forward with an open mind, but we are pleased to present this to council. So in many respects, this is in line with our official community plan and zoning bylaw, but we do recommend some modifications. We feel that we can maintain the R4 zoning here, but just add in some site-specific regulations. And we can also maintain the multifamily mixed residential designation in the OCP. But the OCP has density calculations that are based on units per hectare. And so the issue here is that the property in relative terms is small when you're trying to use the units per hectare count. And so we get into floor area ratios, a bit of a, another way to describe this. So the building being 28 units of mixed sizes and a fair height, 19 meters and whatnot, there are some amendments that are required. So in a moment here, I'll ask Mr. Koberwitz to pull up screen share, go through the details of this. But tonight, what we're looking for is receipt of this application, council resolutions to commence the formal OCP amendment process as outlined in the Local Government Act. We recommend that the applicant host an information session, virtual session, that the neighborhood and the community at large can participate or observe. And also a consideration from council about the amenities. The official community plan talks about density bonusing, amenity contributions. And in this particular case, because we are looking at a means of securing permanent or long-term rental, we're seeking direction from council if the building and the features it contains, such as street front improvements, development cost charges, rooftop common space for residents and so forth, is in fact the amenity in and of itself, or should council direct staff to do further conversation with the applicant. And so I thank you for your time, and I will pass over to Mr. Koberwitz here to go through some of the details.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
Great. So we're presenting tonight a rezoning application for 5681 Ebtide Street. So the proposal, as Director Allen noted, is for 28 rental units, and this consists of a mix of units. There's 4 studios, 10 one-bedroom units, and 14 two-bedroom units. And the two-bedroom units are of a number of different types, some of them having a flex space inside for additional office space or that sort of thing. 28 parking spaces are proposed as well. That's 1 parking space for every residential unit. And the building itself is a total of 5 stories, although it's 4 stories of living space combined with 1 partially exposed sort of split level parking story that conforms to the grade of the property and takes advantage of the slope of the lot currently. So the average height based on the average elevation of the property is 18.5 meters. So the location and the site, the property is located between High Tide Avenue and Wharf Avenue on Ebtide Street. It's currently an undeveloped lot. There's no significant trees. It's mostly overgrown with vegetation currently. It is a fairly gently sloping lot from Ebtide Street as it slopes down towards the rear of the lot. Although all the slopes are not within any of our steep slope development permit areas, as all the grades are less than 20%. So the lot is suitable for development. The surrounding land uses from a zoning perspective, the current zoning on the property is R4. That's our multifamily residential zoning. And this zoning is shared by several of the adjacent properties, including the Ebtide Townhouse Complex, another multifamily site. Adjacent is the R2 zone, which is presently our duplex zone, although most of the homes in the area are still single family configurations. From an OCP land use designation perspective, the area is entirely designated as mixed multifamily, mixed residential. So the use that is being proposed here is certainly suitable for the designation, although as was noted earlier, the density and height of the project is in excess of what would typically be allowed under the OCP. So from a density perspective, the multifamily mixed residential designation currently has a maximum density of 100 units per hectare with a suggested floor area ratio of 1.4. And the proposal as it is now, due to the size of the units, there's a number of small studio units being proposed. So you end up with a higher number of units per area of property. And the amendment that would be required to support this proposal would be 170 units per hectare with a floor area ratio of 1.7. There are comparables in the district of Seashell for this level of development. The Green Court Seniors Housing Development is 5 stories, and it was the OCP was amended specifically for that site to permit 175 units per hectare and a floor area ratio of 1.76. And additionally, the High Tide Housing Facility was 3 stories and at a density of 221 units per hectare with a 1.1 FAR. And I think that illustrates the point that small units, depending on what size of property they're located on, the density numbers when you're dealing with units per hectare can increase quite rapidly with small units. From a height perspective, I noted the height is 18.5 meters from average grade. And so the average grade is established, the average grade of the property is calculated to the highest point of the roof, and that's the 18.5 meters. The real experience of the actual height of the building from a street frontage from ebb tide would be closer to about 15.24 meters to the height of this roof here. And so that would be a more realistic height of the building as experienced from ebb tide street, although the full height of the building would certainly be experienced at the rear. Parking is another regulation that we're recommending be amended in the zoning bylaw. The proposed parking rates, 1 per unit, they are consistent with comparable jurisdictions that have parking provisions in the downtown area for multifamily and in particular rental housing. One per unit is consistent with that, and research in the Lower Mainland suggests that there are far lower parking utilization rates associated with rental tenure and for smaller apartment units. Staff feel quite comfortable at the rate of 1 per unit being an appropriate amount of parking for this particular project. And this is comparable with amendments that were adopted at third reading for community services that will apply to the district of Seashell as a whole, which allow for 1 space per affordable rental housing unit. Now we don't at this point have a sense of what these market units, whether they will qualify for an affordable level. So we're recommending that a site-specific provision be made in the zoning bylaw to ensure that the one space per unit is permissible. Development permit will be required for development permit area number 7 for multifamily residential. And staff are recommending that this be a condition of adoption of this particular zoning amendment. And that would be presented to council, which is where we would present a specific review of the guidelines that are presented in the DPA area, although the applicant has already provided a breakdown of that, and that's included in an attachment to the staff report tonight for preliminary review. And we are proposing that it is likely that the development permit will include a variance to the setback provisions within the R4 zone. And that's to provide some flexibility as the specifics of the project may change through the development permit process. And that would be better handled through a variance once the exact configuration of accesses are determined. And I'll illustrate this on this next slide, where the proposed setbacks, as the applicant has currently proposed them, is 3 meters on this side, 4 meters on this side. However, there are some projections into this setback, particularly this pedestrian access that provides access to the main entrance of the building on this side of the building. And part of the garbage and recycling area is encroaching into the setback here. So these are considerations that would be analyzed in more detail through the development permit process, rather than the density, parking, and those type of land use regulations that are best incorporated into the zoning amendment. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I'll start off with a question. So I'm going to go to page 58 in the new agenda, 41 in the old agenda. Near the top, it notes that the OCP was adopted in 2010, and since that time, both property values and development costs have increased substantially. So I'm wondering if either our director of planner or our acting planning manager could speak to that line a little bit more, and just what really has changed from then to now. I understand building costs have gone up, but why is this needed for this development, and is it needed on a broader sense as well?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in and try and take that on. We did have a development permit issued on this property for a previous owner, and they did not proceed, and they were using the existing zoning, and I think it was 7 units. And the zoning and regulatory scheme sort of pushed us towards 6 or 7 units of 2,000 square feet rather than 28 units of 300 to 1,000 square feet. But I think that, the pressure on land values increasing and the downtown areas, it just pushes towards a higher density, makes it more important to really maximize the opportunities that we have in these appropriate locations. So I think it's in part that. I think it's in part the amount of population growth we've seen in the last decade that, it brings more people, more buyers, and there's fewer rentals, and the rentals have been cottages, particularly in outer-lying electoral areas, rather than rentals in downtown. And I just feel like those values are changing and evolving, and there's a lot of people now that want to rent or buy and live downtown, and perhaps you can see there's other buildings within the Ebb Tide area that have grown over the years, but it's becoming more of a focal point. And I just think I see that as a change and growth in our community.
Another piece that goes along with that part that Councillor McLean was talking about was with regards to the measuring density as number of units per hectare. You indicate in the paragraph here encourages larger units. And we know that many of the people coming here aren't looking for larger units. Many of the people living here aren't looking for larger units. They're looking for smaller units. And so the FAR is a more common measure in multifamily. So are we going to be seeing, I think what Councillor McLean is getting at, are we going to see some of this in the new zoning bylaw, that we're having a different focus to allow for the different types of units we're looking to see? Or does that have to be reflected in the OCP?
Well, it's thank you for the question, Your Worship. It is a combination of the two. The OCP provides us some boundaries and some limits that we work within as we build the zoning bylaw. But the zoning bylaw will be a little bit more modern and encouraging of these types of uses. We have dealt with a number of applicants in the last few months or year who sort of lead with, we assume Seashell just wants single family homes, right? Because our R1 zone allows small lots, big houses, and that's what the applicants assume we want. And so we're trying to find other means to support and encourage these types of developments. And we'll be bringing forward some better and modern policy types within the zoning bylaw 580 when we bring it forward to you.
Thank you. Councillor Toth and then Councillor McLean.
I'm not sure if Councillor McLean has a follow-up or not. If so, I'm happy to defer.
Yeah, okay. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so just sticking on the density conversation. So I do appreciate that the applicant has proposed smaller units. I'm currently attending a housing conference, and one quote I got from today is, "Who are we building housing for?" And I think Right now, we're building a lot of 3-bedroom homes. And that's great for the majority of people. What it's not great for is seniors and young people. So I think we need to look at ways that we can encourage these smaller units. And to the discussion around the new zoning bylaw, this is actually an issue with the OCP. The OCP limits it to essentially 100 units per hectare. And I think Mr. Kobrowitz mentioned a couple examples where we have pushed to get above that, the Lions, the High Tide. I believe Wade, the W2 development is coming in right at the max. And if we look at another example, which is RTC, the one on the water there, we see some very large units. And I think we can, if we look at the OCP, I think we can really think towards that change on a more permanent basis, and just bring down the unit size a little bit, because this is how you bring people downtown, and you can keep the same height, you can keep the same FAR, and just get more people in by making the unit smaller. That makes it more affordable. So either rental tenure or ownership tenure, I think this is something that provides a good housing mix, which is really welcome to see.
Thank you, Councillor Toth.
Thank you. On page 68 of the amended agenda, sorry, I don't have the original page number handy. I'm looking at the west elevation, and it was the one that was presented in the slideshow there. The parking area, I know this is early days for this, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. The parking area in the rear of the building, is that intended to be fenced in or retaining walled in for like privacy from the adjacent properties, or yeah, basically I'm wondering what's going to be the impact on the property owner to the north and the rear of the adjacent properties based on that elevation. Thank you.
Sure, I can answer that. There would be the need for some retaining structure to level out the property to accommodate that flattened parking area. It's not exactly clear at this point how high that would be and whether there would be a fence. Likely there would have to be some sort of fencing just because of safety considerations for people exiting their vehicles and walking in that area. I doubt that it would be such a low retaining wall that there would be no fences required. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so the height of the proposal is probably my major concern with this. Councillor Toth mentioned the west elevation, but if the east elevation is actually, that retaining wall is pretty big. I think I saw that it was well over 4 meters. So don't quote me on that. I've lost the note where I put that in, but it's a pretty big retaining wall on that one side. And I recognize what the applicant is trying to do and make the development street facing, which is within our DPA 7. But it's not taking advantage of the natural slope. So between the highly elevated parking lot and at the front of the building, there's a raised patio. So the whole building is just elevated, I think unnecessarily. I don't want to get into the actual architecture or anything like that. But I would like to see the applicant just bring this building down by whatever means, either lowering that front patio, taking a floor off it, sinking it into the ground. It doesn't match with the surrounding community. The Wade development, again, I go back to that. It's at 16.5 meters. This is proposed to be taller. Yes, it's sitting on a hill, so it's kind of mitigated, but I think it should really be 3 stories facing the street, and maybe add on that extra little rooftop patio. It just doesn't match with the neighborhood. You have a single family right beside it. You have a duplex on the other side. Those are both single story, 2 stories. A 3-story would be a nice addition. 5 is really pushing it, in my opinion.
Okay, so at this point, that is not what we're discussing, right? We're looking at OCP and zoning. And, while the comments, staff can take that away and see how that works with the development and what they're looking to bring forward. At this point, it's not up for discussion. Councillor McLean.
Okay, I wanted to provide a little context to it, but
Yep.
what I would recommend is the applicant reduce the height by 3 meters, approximately a floor. And that is zoning specific.
Thank you. Is there, so you're met, that would be a recommendation. Is that, I'm gonna look to staff. Would that be inside of what we'd be looking at this evening?
Well, Councillor McLean is correct. The height is a component of zoning. But there can be a recommendation for staff to consider that with the applicant rather than actually changing the proposed zoning at this time. First reading is an introduction of the zoning. But it has implications in terms of unit count and so forth. And
yes,
I suspect that the number of units here is probably the baseline to start with, and reducing by floor has significant impacts. So I wouldn't want to suggest making a change tonight. More so, council consider that motion, and if passed, we can follow through discussion with the applicant.
Thank you, Councillor Kuster.
I think this is a great proposal. I'm okay with the height. I think we need to be concerned in this community about getting units built, and we have to start somewhere. And so I'm really happy with this, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Toth.
Thank you. I also support the density, the overall design of the building. I do hear Councillor McLean's concerns. I would strongly encourage the applicant to try and look at setting the building a little bit lower into the site if they can. But I am, we need rental. I am willing to move this forward.
Thank you. Councillor Kuster, did you have another comment? All right, Councillor McLean, did you want to make a motion and see if you can get it seconded and move it forward?
I'm not feeling the support right now. I'm hoping the applicants in the gallery, they hear the feedback. I would like to see this addressed in an early design stage rather than after a public hearing. I'm trying to anticipate some of the community concerns. When I look at this proposal, it's on the outskirts of downtown. And it is really pushing what the OCP has outlined. It clearly indicates 3 to 4 stories after density bonusing. So if it didn't rental, then it wouldn't even have the density bonusing. It would be back to the 7 units that, or whatever it was, townhouse before. So it already is a large increase because it is a rental. So there's got to be some kind of happy medium here. And we're going to have to see how much we want to push it. And I think it's just pushed it a little bit too far on the height on the exterior of our downtown.
Thank you, Councillor Kuster.
Sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand, but sorry about that.
That's okay. All right, seeing no further questions or comments, there are some recommendations on page 55, and I won't make you read them, given they're pretty extensive. What would you like to do, Council? Councillor Toth.
I will move the recommendations as presented in the staff report on page 55 of the amended agenda.
Thank you. And that's been seconded. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Would you like that recorded? Thank you. Jennifer, did you get that?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. So moving on to item 8.1B. This is on page 105 in the amended agenda. This is bylaw number 492-29 2021 for 5681 Ebb Tide, being a bylaw to amend District of Seashell Official Community Plan bylaw number 492 2010. I look for someone to move first reading. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Then item 8.1, sorry, Councillor McLean, did you vote in favor of that? Thank you. Item 8.1C, bylaw number 25-313, 2021, 5681 Ebtide, being a bylaw to amend District of Seashell zoning bylaw number 25, 1987. I look for someone to move first reading. Moved. Seconder, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you. All right, moving on. Thank you, Mr. Kolowitz. Moving on to item 8.2. This is the Seashell Sewage Facilities Commission Amendment Bylaw number 225-5, 2021. Motion to receive the report. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. And Ms. Frank.
Thank you, Your Worship. This item is for council to consider adoption of Seashell Sewage Facilities Commission Amendment Bylaw number 225-5, 2021. Council gave it 3 readings at its May 19th regular meeting, and it would be in order now to consider adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Just a quick question for the corporate officer. Once we adopt this, we're a little closer to getting the Sewage Commission set back up. What'll be the next steps, given that we will need to get a chair, a non-voting chair? I'm just wondering what the staff plan is for that.
There actually isn't a staff plan at this point. You know, there's some flexibility on how we want to do that, but there hasn't actually been any consideration. This might be the time now for council perhaps to provide some direction or any ideas on that.
Okay, and the commission actually indicates that it needs to be somebody who is not an elected official, has to be somebody residing in the area, I believe, and it has to be acceptable to the members of the Sewage Commission. So perhaps we could put some names forward, you know, even individually. It doesn't have to be at a council meeting. We can put some names forward because they will also have to accept the position. And we could solicit some names from the Seashell Council as well. And then I guess the Sewage Commission themselves can determine who that is. Councillor McLean?
Yeah, I'd just like to see some kind of simple application process. That's how we do it with all of our other committees. So send in your name, send in a little bit about yourself, and I'd be happy to delegate authority to the Sewer Commission to determine the successful applicant.
I think the Sewage Commission actually has the delegated authority to do that. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be totally in favor of it being wide open. You know, if we've got people that we'd like to recommend for it, we can suggest that they put in an application, but I think it'll be up to whoever is interested in participating to put their name forward, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Sure, we could then move forward with doing some advertising, notice in the newspaper perhaps, and on our webpage, etc., seeking applications.
Yeah, you may want to reach out to the Seashell Council as well and their staff to have them be part of that as well.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. All right, there is a recommendation on page 107. Someone like to move that recommendation? Councillor Toth.
I will move recommendation 2 that council proceed with adoption of Seashell Sewage Facilities Commission Amendment Bylaw number 225-5, 2021.
And is there a seconder? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to page 109, 8.2B. This is District of Seashell Sewage Facilities Commission Amendment Bylaw number 225-5, 2021, being a bylaw to amend Sewage Facilities Commission Bylaw number 225, 1994 to change membership composition. And look for someone to move adoption. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Frank.
Can I just jump in?
Yes, thank you.
I'd just like to make that motion to seek a chair, just formally.
Okay.
So I'd just like to move a motion that we direct staff to seek applications for the Sewer Commission bylaw and delegate authority to the Sewer Commission bylaw for selection.
CAO Yates?
Yeah, I'm sorry to intervene. I think you really do need to wait until you have the inaugural meeting with the Seashell Nation members present. This is a joint decision to be made, not ours to do alone. So you're jumping the gun, I think, a little bit on the commission before we start.
Thank you.
That's fair. I'll withdraw.
Thank you. All right, so that has been adopted. Anything further on that one? Moving on to item 10.1, road naming policy 3.1.10. And this is Ms. Stepovic. I look for a motion, first of all, to receive the report. Moved. There a mover and a seconder, moved, seconded, all in favor. Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Stepovic, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this evening's report is a follow-up from the February 3rd staff report to Council, after which Council directed that the draft road naming policy be referred to neighboring jurisdictions, the Seashell Nation, SCRD, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and local community associations, and to design a process for involving the community in suggestions for future road names. So to recap, the policy attached to the report provides guidelines and procedures for naming or renaming municipal roads, lanes, trails, bridges, and other public ways. Referrals were sent out to the above list and others. The feedback received is attached to the report. The main changes to the draft policy as a result of the referrals were to include all naming and renaming referrals to the Seashell Nation and to clarify the process for making an application. Otherwise, the policy seemed to be well received and would adequately ensure that all agencies, organizations, and individuals with an interest in road names and addressing are considered in the process. Staff recommends that the road naming policy be adopted as presented. Additionally, that the online form be placed on the district's website as a way of engaging with the community on future road name suggestions. And finally, that fees and charges bylaw number 575 be amended to include a $500 application fee for renaming an existing road to cover municipal costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, so just looping back to the process of collecting names from the community. Once we have a list established and we've determined that names meet the policy generally, will that list form part of the policy, or will it be a standalone document that staff holds?
The way the policy is drafted, it would not be attached to the policy. It would be a standalone list, like a reserve list that staff would collect and manage and bring forward the names to adopt a batch of road names at one time. This is what we've done in the past, and it is mostly for efficiency purposes. There's also an option to adopt one at a time, but I believe that that might slow down the process, for development and that sort of thing. And there's no reason that developers can't suggest names to the list as well. That's what we normally do through our development process. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? So there are some recommendations on page 110. What would you like to do? Councillor Toth.
Don't see anybody else in a big rush to move the recommendations. So I will move recommendation 2 that council policy 3.1.10 road naming 2021 be adopted as presented. Recommendation 3 that staff be directed to solicit community input on future road names to be used as a reserve list. And recommendation 4 that the fees and charges bylaw number 575 be amended to include a $500 application fee for renaming a road.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Stepovic.
Thank you.
Moving on, item number 10.2. This is the 2020 Statement of Financial Information, or called the SOFI report. And Ms. Smith, over to you.
Thank you. I'll share my screen here. And you're seeing the right screen, I'm assuming?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. So the purpose of this presentation is to have council consider and approve the district's 2020 Statement of Financial Information. Each year, the district is required to file a financial information under the provision of the Financial Information Act within 6 months of the year end. So in this case, it would be June 30th, 2021. This report includes our audited financial statements, which were presented to council on May 5th. And the SOFI report also includes additional financial information such as wages and expenses for both elected officials and staff. In addition, payments to suppliers and grants paid out, which exceed $25,000 in a year. Also, disclosure of any financial guarantees or amenity agreements, if applicable, and in this case, there's none. So I can read the recommendation if you like. That the report from the Manager of Financial Services dated June 2nd, 2021 regarding the 2020 Statements of Financial Information be received, and that the District of Seashell's 2020 Statement of Financial Information be approved by submission to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and that the Mayor and the Director of Finance be authorized to sign the Statement of Financial Information approval form. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have you stop sharing, and then we'll see if we have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Council. I was going to say, you're probably noticing some flickering on my face here. This is that monitor thing that I got going on. It's coming and it's going and it's on and it's off, and it's really weird. Councilor McLean.
Yeah, just going to the list of suppliers. Hopefully a quick question and then a bigger question. I noticed on the list is the District of Seashell. So did we supply ourselves with something?
Taxes. We paid taxes. I believe that's what it is for the properties that we hold.
Okay. And then on that list as well is several developers. So just something I noticed: Westcor, Swarney Lumber, RTC Properties. What is that relationship generally?
I would say, without knowing specifically, I would say that it's probably for some specific project. I can follow up on that and give you more information, but I can't tell you off the top.
Could be for a host of things, including payback of
yes,
security for subdivision, or for for a deposit they had put into us that they get refunded on.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that works.
Thank
you. I have a question. I think this shows every year. It's on page 137, and this has to do with the remuneration for elected officials. And I notice if you look at the councillors, and I think I warned you about this question, for the councillors, the remuneration is different for each councillor. Why is that?
Well, because the benefit premiums for each person is different depending on what their coverage is. And in some cases, staff can opt out of benefits and get paid cash in lieu. So that's where you're going to see your differences. It just depends on, like I said, what benefits are being covered by that specific staff member. And that's why you're going to see a difference in, because that's all taxable benefits. So it becomes part of their income.
Okay, so you're saying, like, we do contribute some to our, as a, or whatever, that we contribute to our, wow, to our or benefits. So whatever the municipality, I know I got this flashing. Or whatever the municipality contributes is a taxable benefit that we have to absorb and pay taxes on. Okay.
You just pay taxes on it. That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
But it does show up as.
Okay. Thank you. Any other counselor? Any other questions? I should just turn my camera off, right?
Yeah, you're a little bit dark, but at least you're not flashing on.
It's flashing at me. It was on. It's weird. Okay. That's from council. All right, so there are some recommendations. I'd like to make one minor change to the recommendation on page 132 and number 2. I think they've changed the ministry. It's no longer Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. They've moved housing out. It's just Ministry of Municipal Affairs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on, reports from councillors. Who did I start with last time? The last 2 times, and they told me, you started with me twice. So I won't start with them. How about if we start with Councillor Kuster, then Councillors Lamb, Scott, Toth, McLean, and then Rowe. So Councillor Kuster, you're first.
Hey, what did I do? I attended the SCRD presentation on water meters, which was definitely very thorough, very detailed. So that was great. And also attended the library board meeting on the weekend. And again, very busy group of people there. Leanne's working on a restart plan and how to integrate the library into the COVID restart plan. They were just received a $2,500 Law Matters grant. So they're planning on buying some law books with that money. And what else? I think they also mentioned that they are part of the applying for the grant for the Canada Healthy Communities, along with the SIGD and the District of Seashell. And that's it for that. And I'm just wearing orange today in honor of National Indigenous Peoples Day. And I wanted to thank Mayor Seegers for bringing that up at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yep. Monday, I attended the ceremony over at the Seashell Nation, and it was very well attended. And as we were told, they were trying to keep it down to groups of 50, so they did. They had probably 10 groups of 50 there, so it was, looked pretty good. But it was very, very well done, and yeah, just, does get you thinking about what's going on. So that's my report. That's all I've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Nothing to report on my end.
Thank you. Councillor Toth.
Thank you. Let's see. Attended AVICC last week, the AGM on, I guess that was Friday. It's just a one-day event held on Zoom. We have heard, of course, that UBCM is going to be held virtually again this year, including a additional week of telephone meetings with ministers. I found UBCM last year trying, and I really don't appreciate the telephone meeting format, but hopefully it'll be the last time it happens. Attended the Community Forest AGM at the start of this week. I've got approximately $215,000 coming to the District of Seashell in the form of the extraordinary dividend. Half of that, of course, goes into the long-term legacy reserve. Attending the Canadian Rural and Remote Housing and Homelessness Symposium this week, which is probably the conference with the longest title that you'll find. Not a lot of elected officials at this conference, actually, so it tends to be more geared towards nonprofit actionable items and programs, and less around, municipal policies. The symposium wraps up tomorrow, The hours have been all over the place because I guess they're trying to accommodate as much of the country as they can. And yeah, of course, there was the Let's Talk Water event. I've got some notes in my SCRD report, but there have been great questions raised both at the event and since. You can see some of the questions and the answers to them and participate in the conversation at letstalk.scrd.ca. And that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor McLean.
Okay, so like Councillor Toth, I attended that conference with a very long name. It's housing and homelessness, rural, Canadian, in some order like that. So I think to Councillor Toth's comment about not being directed at councillors, there is one session tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to doing, which is specifically for elected officials. And it's about picking plans up back off the shelf. So you noticed I pulled out the Parks Master Plan. I got my strategic plan here in front of me, which leads me to my next point. Item 3.2 of the strategic plan, providing a mix of housing types throughout the district that provide options for a range of needs and incomes. We obviously saw that development application earlier, but I think I mentioned the question, who are we building for? So I want to dig into some of the data that we might be able to get access to and trying just to improve our data systems to see what kind of houses we are building. What kind of units, what are they rental, are they ownership, are they occupied? So I'll probably be putting forward a motion in the next couple of weeks regarding that and just trying to collect some better data so we can measure that strategic priority for our council. I did attend one very interesting session about innovative financing for workforce housing. So the basic premise of this idea is that all of the partners share equity in units that are built. So at the end of the day, the homeowner, the person living there, only pays for a portion of the unit. And they only pay for a portion of their market value of the unit, sorry. But what I think is innovative is that when that unit sells, they sell it at market rate and all the equity partners get paid out. So it's a very different way of building affordable housing in that it's not permanent. It's affordable for the first person, but after that, it just becomes part of the general housing supply. But what it does is it allows our money to go further. So when we invest in it, we get it returned after that unit is sold, so we can invest some money again. So it's just a very different way of thinking. And I'm going to be poking the Workforce Housing Society and trying to get them a copy of that presentation and see how it can work with some of the stuff that they're doing there. I think that's all I got. Attended AVICC Water Meters Forum. Tomorrow I have a meeting with the Ferry Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, I don't believe it's public, but we will be talking with BC Ferries and figuring out what's next as we move forward together.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Sorry, I don't have anything that hasn't already been said.
Thank you. Okay. I'm also attending, myself, Councillor Toth, Councillor are all attending that conference with the long name. I actually had to look it up and write it down. Canadian Rural and Remote Housing and Homelessness Symposium. Sorry, hang on, somebody's trying to phone me here. There was a session this morning, I think, that we all were raving about. It's a fellow from McGill University who's going out into communities, and he put together a really good presentation. He started talking about how to design community, then neighborhoods, and then houses, and different ways of construction. We will be getting the presentation. I think it's a great conversation starter that we'll be able to use in moving forward some of the housing initiatives that we're looking at doing here in the district. At the regional district, I'm going to beat Councillor Toth on this one. I don't know if he's got it in here, but he was probably going to mention it. We are doing prep for their strategic plan review, which will be next week, Friday. And then I get to go to the Air Cadets ceremonial review on Sunday. So looking forward to that. And that is still on Zoom. Looking forward to seeing those in person. That's all I have. I'm going to turn over to Councillor Toth for SCRD.
Thank you. I was not going to mention the strategic plan review. I was going to mention it after the fact, but that's okay. We have been, as directors, receiving surveys to sort of try and do some of the pre-work so that we can make the best use of the time that we've got together virtually, because nothing like more meetings on Zoom. My report is attached. Just wanted to highlight in there that I do have a link to the Let's Talk with regards to water metering for anybody who's got the electronic copy of the agenda. And yeah, happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Councillor Toth on his SCRD report? Councillor McLean.
Just one on the operating agreement with BC Transit. Do we have an idea of how transit service is going to recover post-COVID, during COVID? Are we going to get back to 100% capacity that we were seeing beforehand? And what's the direction there?
I don't have the exact date handy, but there is the intention of resuming 100% service hours. I believe it's the end of June, but I'd have to go back and look that up to confirm it for you.
Yeah, and that's part of the agreement with regards to the restart funds that we received from the provincial government, that in order to be able to have those funds, we had to agree to go back to 100% operations at a certain date, and they dictated what that date was.
Perfect. That's great news. I think a lot of people would like to see the full service, even if it hasn't hit that ridership yet.
Yeah, one of the things that is going to be happening, because the agreement is based on the Transit Futures Plan from 2013. They're going to be starting this fall with consultation with the community to look at what we want to see and what our community wants to see with regards to transit over the next 5 years potentially. And then that would start informing the operating agreements going forward, because they have to put the capital in place, right, provincially, to be able to fund those. So that conversation is going to start this fall.
And just a question on that one. Is that going to include a conversation on service up Seashell Inlet Road? Is that within the 5-year planning scope, or are we thinking more? I know this is Seashell, but I have a keen interest on expanding service to Gibsons and getting that loop-de-loop bus Route 1 streamlined.
The Route 90 or because the Route 90 is the half hour, the one that was supposed to be every half hour for.
Yeah, there's an old proposal for Route 5. It essentially replaces the Elphinstone Loop and the Lower Gibsons Loop on Route 1. And it'd make Route 1 a whole lot more efficient, which serves people going between Seashell and Gibsons.
Right, so they'd be looking at feeder routes, etc. When they looked at, I mean, if you go back and look at the agenda, they actually identify which of the items in the Transit Future Plan from 2013 were implemented. Actually, not many of them were. One of them for Seashell Inlet Road, service was in that plan, was not implemented. Additional service on Route 90, the feeder routes, a lot of them, park and ride, a lot of them weren't implemented. And it had to do with the fact that when we were looking at on the Sunshine Coast expanding Route 90, at that point, the province put a freeze on funding for 3 years. So now we're just kind of coming out the other end of that. And we're looking at, this is what we said, we didn't deliver. Where do we want to go with this? So that's the conversation to have. And all of that is on the table.
I'm hoping that it's going to be a little more realistic with this next one, because park and rides are a great idea, but unfortunately they're a huge waste of land where we can't afford to spare land to park vehicles right now. So it'd be really interesting to see if there's anything creative that comes out of that, partnerships with developers or what have you.
Right. Any other questions on SCRD? Okay, let's move on to correspondence. Now, motion to receive the correspondence. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Is there anything that you would like to do with the letter from the District of Tofino? I do know that this is a conversation the community forest is having around, how do they take some of the forest that we have now and plan for old growth? Councillor Toth.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, I haven't had a chance to dig into it because of the symposium the last couple days, but either yesterday or today, the premier did announce that they were going to be looking at forestry tenures, including how to preserve old growth, how to allow new old growth stands to develop, and also looking at sort of rescaling forestry operations to more community-minded aspects. So it'd be interesting to see how that fits in with these, with this particular letter, but other ones that we've seen. So.
All right, not seeing any recommendations coming forward. Are there any emergency items from staff?
None, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, second.